Hey guys, and welcome to the AfterYouth Podcast, the podcast for young adults by young adults. We are your hosts, Garrett Vess, and with me is Josh Cave. Today we are tackling the issue of stress and how to deal with it.
What's up, guys, and thanks for joining us for another episode. And before we go into a deep dive about stress or anything else about it, let's talk about what stress really is. When I think about stress, the first thing I think about is that overwhelming feeling, the feeling that I can't control anything. You know, that sinking feeling that everybody thinks of where, work is stressful, I'm too busy, I've got all this stuff going on, and almost feeling like you're drowning. That's what I think of, but I think there's some misconceptions about stress that we really don't talk about very often. An article on the Mental Health Foundation's website states that stress is our body's response to pressure. And they go to explain that some stress is good and some stress is not so good. And I think whenever we have a discussion about stress, we don't talk about good stress. It's always the bad. It's always the overwhelming. It's always the problem. But I think we need to remember that stress can bring out the best of us. The problem becomes whenever stress is long-term and constant on us. So good stress would be if you're running a marathon and your body gets stressed, your body gets work, but there's that adrenaline, that push, your body kicks into another gear because of stress. Or even if you're getting ready to give a speech and you're stressed about it, you're nervous about it, and your body kicks into another gear to help you get through it and can actually help you to perform better than if you had no stress at all. The problem stress is a completely different issue. The problem stress comes from a constant long-term stress. If you feel continually pressured at work, it can cause problems mentally, where you're struggling with stress and feeling like you're drowning in a ton of things that you have to do and things like that, or maybe you feel inadequate constantly and just this weight feels like it's dragging you down. That's the stress that we usually think of. This kind of constant pressure can lead to a lot of different side effects. You can feel anxious, afraid, sad, irritable, frustrated, or depressed. I mean, there's this huge range of different emotions that you can feel because stress has weighed you down so much. And it goes from this good thing to this really, really terrible thing that causes us pain and anxiety and frustration. But for some people, it can go further than emotions. For some people, it can cause physical problems. It can cause headaches, nausea, indigestion, and plenty of other things. So I want to tell you that stress is a real thing. It can affect your physical body, your mental state, your emotions, and your relationship with others. It's real. Whenever we come and we talk about it today, this is not a discussion where we go, you just need to get better. You just need to stop overreacting. Stress is a real thing that hits all of us in different ways. In a different article on the Mental Health Foundation's website, they cite a poll by YouGov. In this poll, they studied 4,619 people, and they found that 74% of people have felt stressed in the last year. They felt so stressed that they were unable to cope. And only 7% of young adults say they have never felt overwhelmed. These are huge numbers. These are 93% of young adults have felt incredibly overwhelmed. They've faced stress. They've faced anxiety along with it. It's clear that if you're feeling stressed, if you're going through something like that, that you're not alone. There's plenty of other people. I've gone through a lot of stress. Garrett, as he'll explain in a few minutes, feels like he's stressed almost all the time. So people face it differently. We go through it differently, but it's definitely a common issue. Garrett, let's start with you here. Was there a time or do you have a good example of when you felt really stressed, or explain a season of life where you felt really stressed?
So I can explain something that happened this week. Well, I had a few things happen this week, and you already know about them. But I'll tell you the first thing that happened. So Wednesday morning, I woke up and I'm getting ready for work, and my dad comes in my room, and he's like, says something to me. I was like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I think we're gonna have everybody over tonight at the house, and we're gonna do like we're gonna swim, and we're gonna do a little devotion outside. Would you want to do the devotion?" And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure." I'm all excited about it. I've got my Bible and stuff with me at work, and I'm like looking over stuff. I'm getting ready. Well, I'm kind of all over the place, and I get home and I'm reading Job, and I'm like, I'm gonna talk about Job tonight, and it hits me, and I'm like, I got it. Well, everybody got over at the house around 7:30, and I lost it. Like everything I was gonna talk about just fell. It's like it fell through, and so I'm like, I'm freaking out at this point, and I got super stressed just in that moment, and I take a break for a little bit, and it's been like we're waiting to do the devotion until everybody's here,
Yeah.
and it's like 9, and Dad's like, "All right, you ready to go?" I'm like, "I have nothing." Like and not that I wasn't like prepared, but like it just, I was like, it still didn't feel right. So I go in my room for a few minutes. Okay, okay, Dad, give me 10 minutes. I come out, and I'm freaking out, and I'm super stressed about it. But right once I started like the devotion, like I was fine.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that good stress you were talking about. Like once I was in, like you're talking about the speech. Once I got started talking in the devotion, I was fine, and I think it ended up helping me out more than me being stressed or not being stressed. So
Yeah, like it pushed you to be better.
yeah, I mean, because I was all over the place, and I'm like, I had every single notebook. I've like kept notes in, prayers in, any kind of stuff like that, like sermons, whether it was somebody else preaching or sermons I wrote. It was all in those. There's like 6 of them. I'm laying out on my bed. I'm like, can I find something? Can I find something? And I finally was like, this is it. It was nice. So
That's awesome. How did it end up going? Like once you got it all put together?
it went good. And dad knew how I was acting, and I was all over the place. I was so tore up because I was like, I've been doing this all day, haven't been able to figure out anything. And Dad was like, I can't believe you pulled that off. He was like, I can't believe it went as well as it did. Because he was like, I mean, I almost was like, no, you're not doing it. Because you're so everywhere. I was like, well, it's okay.
I love your dad because he will for real like throw you into anything. Speaking of which, I think he had you do something last night too, didn't he?
Yeah. So we got Freedom Fest.
Oh, what is Freedom Fest for the people who don't know?
So Freedom Fest is an event we have at the church, and it's 4th of July theme, all that, and they just have vendors come out, and they'll have a guy come and preach. A well-known worship team, worship band, whatever. We had I Am They this year. They're pretty good. They're pretty big right now. They're on the rise. But I had to go on stage and talk about refuge, and this he gave me a few days for this.
No, that's generous of him.
Yeah, it wasn't like, Garrett, you're gonna do a devotional tonight. It was all right, hey, you need to do this. You want to do it? I'm such an introvert about certain things. Like, I was bad when I was a kid. You can ask Molly. It was bad. But I've tried to like let myself get out there, and I want to take like any opportunity I can because I'm trying to grow and all this different stuff. But I was super stressed out about that too. I thought I was going to throw up before I went up there because Pastor Greg said there was probably 1,500 people there.
It sure seemed like it.
It was, I mean, there was a ton of people. But yeah, I just had to give like a little bit on refuge and, explaining what we're about and just inviting people. But yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Now in these two situations, what do you think was the main thing that caused you to feel stressed? I mean, obviously you're going up to do this thing, but like inside of you, why would you feel stress in that situation? Like, for some people they have trouble with a lack of control, like, or a desire for success, or I mean, maybe in your case, like just not wanting to get embarrassed.
Yeah, like I think a lot of times for me and other people, like I don't want to get up there and embarrass myself. Not necessarily embarrass myself, but I don't want to go up there and like repeat things. And I have trouble like I just did it. I say like and all the time. It's if I don't know where to go, I like resort to that word. And it's just in my vocabulary. Like I've said it 4 times since I've explained it.
It's almost like,
You did it.
yeah, I do it too. I do it all the time. But it's how you want other people to perceive you, like as a person with a decent vocabulary and an ability to put together a string of words in front of people, to be respected doing that.
Yeah.
And I can see that.
And it's just like I want to be presentable and I want to be professional about it too. Like I want them to be like, he was well spoken. He knew what he was doing up there. I also want people to know that I enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes like it can come across as, man, he just came up there, just want to get that done and go. And I want it to be where, and my personality, I'll probably always be nervous doing something like that. But I want it to be where when I get up there, I'm fine.
Now, I've got a little different story from my own life. Kind of not really a moment where I was stressed, but more of a season of my life. This wasn't that long ago, but a little while ago, I was doing a lot of things. I had a lot on my plate. Molly and I were married. We had been married for almost a year at that point. I was finishing up my degree. I was in my last year or so of my degree. I was working a full-time job, the same one I'm working now, and I was working as a part-time youth pastor. Looking back, it's hard to believe that I was able to do all of that. But during this time of my life, I was super overwhelmed. I had a lot of pressure on me from a lot of different areas. For those of you that are married, you know what it's like to try to make time for your spouse. So I was trying to make time for my spouse. I was trying to write papers for school, and I was trying to, to make a living, to pay our bills, to pay our rent, to continue to build our life, while at the same time trying to run a youth ministry and trying to do it successfully. So during this time, I was super stressed. I was super anxious and trying to make sure I was doing the right things. And some days were good, other days were difficult, but I had a lot of stress overall. The main reason that I faced stress during this time was because I had stretched myself really thin. I had put too much on my plate. I'm not the kind of person that I'm going to be willing to sacrifice anything. Like, I'm going to make straight A's in school. I'm going to, my work is still going to be good. What I do at the church is still going to be top notch. And I'm still going to make time for Molly, and we're going to enjoy ourselves. So it was really challenging. I stretched myself so thin. But the way I was able to get through that time in my life and get past it was I was able to make sure I made time for myself. So on top of all the other things I had to do, I made sure that I could do some of the things I wanted to do. One of the big things that I enjoy, and it's kind of my way of releasing stress, is playing video games. Garrett and I, we have some other guys we play 2K with, and so I made sure that, a couple of times a week, I would take an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours, and I would make sure I got to play video games with them, because for me, it was my way of releasing that stress, and sometimes I had to remind myself, like, if I can just make it a couple more days, I can play with the guys, and it'll all be okay. Everything will be all right. And so it was difficult to be in that time of stress, but at the same time, I just found that outlet that I needed to release that stress. I want to kind of lay out a solution on how to deal with stress, the $1 million question. And I've done a lot of research on this, and I've searched some ideas in the Bible, and I have 3 ideas I want to give you on how to deal with stress. So the first of these 3 ideas is be mindful of what makes you stressed. The very best way you can handle stress in your life is to avoid the things that make you stressed out. And there's kind of a fine line there, and I want to make sure I point this out. Don't avoid things that will make you better because they make you stressed. Like, Garrett's dad pushes him to do these different opportunities, and sometimes at the last minute, because his dad knows it'll make Garrett a better speaker. It'll make him more comfortable on stage. And if Garrett ran from every opportunity, he would completely lose the opportunity to get better. And so it's important not to run away from opportunities that could grow you. So, like, for me, I'm a very success-driven person. I'm a goal-oriented person. I want to achieve things. I want to go out and get them. And I'll do whatever it takes to get them. But with that, I can stretch myself really thin. I can overwork myself sometimes. And so for me, I have to make sure I don't overwork myself. I have to make time for myself to avoid burnout. But maybe you get stressed over other things. If it stresses you out comparing yourself to other people, like if you feel inadequate because you're scrolling through Instagram and seeing other people, like maybe delete Instagram for a couple of weeks. And I know that's like, no way, don't touch my Instagram, no.
Gosh, my friends.
But for real, whenever it comes to stress, it's such an easy way to avoid that. And maybe even just getting away from it for a couple weeks can reset your perspective and remind you that, you don't need to compare yourself to everybody. Like, you're a pretty good person as is. Maybe you're different. Maybe you get stressed about the future. Like I said, I'm a very goal-oriented person, so like this doesn't hit me as hard, but if you're stressed about the future, maybe start making some basic goals. Like, if you want to write a book, you know how you write a book? You start out writing the first page and you start working on it slowly. Nobody writes a book in a day. And so what you have to do is like slowly start making goals. Like, today I'm going to research. Tomorrow I'm going to start building an outline for the first chapter. And then a week from now, I'm going to start putting it to paper. And you start making those small goals and you start taking chunks out of your overall goal. Because a lot of times we have these huge mountain-sized goals. Like, I want to write a book. And then it's like, man, this is so overwhelming to think about. And then we never start because it's such a hard thing to do. But you start making some of those small goals. You start chasing after some of those small things. And so if you get stressed about the future, start doing things to help yourself out so you don't get stressed about the big picture. The second thing is take time for yourself. You have to rest. You can work all day, every day for your goals, for whatever you're trying to get to. And you can stress yourself out and kill yourself in the process. And it's not going to do you any good. But it's important to take time for yourself. Stress can be constant if you don't take time to do the things that you enjoy doing. Because you can be doing good things, like you can hang out with friends and you can be doing things for other people. You can be spending time with your significant other. You can be spending time with family. You can be doing all the right things. But if you don't take time for yourself, you could still end up in burnout. You could still end up stressed out all the time because there's no time for you. And I think the Bible even reinforces this idea. In the Old Testament, that was one of the things that God put in place. He said, take the Sabbath day, make it holy, don't do any work, rest on the seventh day. And I think it's really important that we do that. You could say taking a whole day is too much for me. I've got too much to do, too much going on. Maybe don't take a whole day. Maybe take an afternoon. Maybe take just a little while for yourself. Because if you sit there and sacrifice the time you need for yourself, you will push your own limits. You will burn out at some point. Nobody can go without resting and avoid burnout. So every one of us need rest. Set up that Sabbath day if you have the time. Take a break. Breathe. Do whatever you enjoy doing. Watch that movie. Play that video game. Take some time for yourself. Don't go crazy with it, but take the time you need for your own mental health. And the third thing is share with others what you're going through. Maybe you've tried all the options. You've listened to self-help books. You've heard the podcast. You've read the blogs. And you've tried all the steps and you're like, nothing's working. Every self-help thing I've tried, I've sat in a salt bath with cucumbers on my face and it just didn't work, I've tried everything I can try. I think it's really important that we reach out to others whenever we're having a hard time. That's one of the reasons we talk about young adult groups so much, is because that time with other people, that community of believers that you can talk to about your problems is such a big deal. Being able to vent and be like, man, my work really stinks right now. I've just had a brutal week. This has gone wrong. This has gone wrong. My tire went flat. I came home, my dog was throwing up, and then this happened and this happened. Being able to tell that to somebody who genuinely cares about you can be the difference in your stress and your relief. Because it means a lot whenever somebody else loves on you and cares about you through those times. And I can't say 100% of the time these three things are going to keep you from stress. But I would say with pretty good certainty that these things are not going to hurt. They're going to help you get closer to a point where you feel some of that relief and some of that pressure on you goes away. So I want to switch gears here and go from talking about this topic to just me and Garrett talking about it. So Garrett, what are your thoughts on the solutions that we've offered here?
When you're dealing with any kind of stress, I think you got to sit down and realize that you got to work on yourself and you've got to find a way to get yourself help or get yourself better. I think once you realize that, that's the first thing you got to realize. And then, the 3 points we've got, like you're saying, it might not be the solution, but I don't see how you can't progress from doing the 3 things.
Yeah. And one thing you just said about you have to know yourself. We all handle things differently. Like, for example, and this is not knocking, but me and Molly can handle different amounts of stress. There are some things that she handles differently than I do. And just because we're different people. And I think it's really important to understand that the way somebody else can deal with stress or relieve their stress is different than yours. And you have to kind of navigate that, and find what works for you. Video games work for me. I promise you 100% that playing video games would not help Molly's stress. She gets stressed out playing Fortnite with me. So that's that just doesn't work. We're just different people. And so you have to kind of learn how to deal with stress in your own life. Garrett, you mentioned to me off podcast that there are times that you feel stress like all the time. Can we talk about that a little bit?
You're very oriented, and I'm one of those people that kind of worries about the future all the time. And it's not that I don't have goals, but it's like I'm kind of stressed on, like, I've got to get this done before I can start this type thing. And so I get in this place, like, I think about work sometimes, and I'm like, to be able to move on to another job, I've got to get this situated in my life so that I can get this worked out so I can work here so I don't have to be at this job. And that was a lot of different stuff for me, just moving from one job to another job, you know? And so I get so caught up on these goals or just things that I need done before I can move on to another thing. And so that's why a lot of stress is built up in my life, I think, because I'm so worried about, man, I got to do this before I do that, you know? And that's just the basis of it, really.
Like, just so I understand, it's almost like you have this to-do list and everything else is dependent on this first thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like, in your mind, you're having to finish this thing that you can't really finish right now to move on to the rest of it. And so there's like this underlying, like, I'm not getting to where I want to go because I'm stuck here.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, when you're little, your mom's like, all right, go make your bed type deal. Go make your bed. If you can't get that done, what else can you accomplish throughout the day, you know?
Yeah.
That type of thing. Like, you got to do that before you can go do that.
Yeah.
I remember mom being like, all right, go make your bed and clean up your room before you go outside and play. And, well, I'll make my bed, but I'll kick all my clothes under my bed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, I feel like. And not that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do at work, and that was just an example.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I was just going to add, I'm not a very overly stressed out person. I'm pretty calm natured for the most part. I don't get mad at things really. So whenever I'm stressed, like it's a big deal. Like, not saying that I never get stressed, but for me, like, I really sit down and I really think about why I'm stressed, like how I get past it. I think it just goes back to how people handle things differently. Garrett and I have completely different things that we get stressed about. And I think it's just interesting to see those different perspectives. So today we've talked about what stress is, and that there's good stress and bad stress. We talked about some statistics and that 93% of young adults have experienced feeling incredibly overwhelmed. But we talked about some stories from our own lives of times where we've experienced stress and we've dealt with some of those things and how we got past that, how we dealt with it in the moment. And then we talked about some solutions. We gave 3 different solutions on how to deal with stress. 1 is be mindful of what makes you stressed. Avoid the things that stress you out. 2, take time for yourself. Rest. Take that Sabbath day. And then finally, share with others what you're going through. Talking to somebody else can be really helpful. And so thank you again for listening today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you were able to get something out of this episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're so glad you tuned in. If you got something out of this and it really spoke to your life, would you let us know? We'd love to connect with you on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. On Instagram and Twitter, you can find us at AfterYouth Pod, or on Facebook, the AfterYouth Pod. And we'll see you guys next week.